Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we're talking about yet another Minnesota Vikings victory. That's right, we got 8 in a row for Mr. Keenum now. Vikings rolling in at 10-2. Could not be much hotter at this point. Defense absolutely shuts down Atlanta's, vertical offense. Xavier Rhodes, a phenomenal performance. Case Keenum continued to do his thing, fight through a little bit of adversity to, come out with a strong performance at the end of the game. Plenty to talk about today, so I want to jump right into this. But basically what we're looking at, offense, defense, we'll go through the NFC Playoff Picture a little bit, where the Vikings stand now and where we think they're going to stand in the future, and we'll finish up with some Twitter takes for you guys. So let's jump in here with a word from our sponsor real quick. Once again, Black Stack Brewing here. With a Vikings victory, that's another Minnesota Vikings victory on the horizon. It's important to talk about victory, success, winning, and beer. That's right, it's time for the beer pong tournament over at Black Stack Brewing. The Jingle Cup has finally arrived. Come pong with us next Saturday, December 9th, for a chance to win free beer for a year and $100 in free delivery from Running Tap. The tourney starts at noon, but if you want to limber up ahead of time, come in at 11 for yoga with Ohm Brewers. They bring yoga to breweries and do an absolutely fantastic job. El Burrito Mercado will also be there with delicious tacos. There's always great beer over at Black Stack Brewing, but you knew that already. You really can't go wrong here. See you at the Jingle Cup next Saturday. Tickets available at beerpong.twincities.directory. That's www.beerpong.twincities.directory. All right, folks, let's jump right into starting with Case Keenum here, of course. We always start with the quarterback position. This episode will be no different. What did you see from Case Keenum today? As I mentioned kind of during the intro, didn't start off the hottest, but he definitely finished strong in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, I mean, he did throw an incomplete pass in the entire second half.
Yeah, he did do that.
He did do that, yeah. And I also saw, I think, a stat from, I can't remember where it was from. I think Adam Schefter actually tweeted it, so it's from ESPN. But Case Keenum was 18 for 18 on pass attempts within the numbers on the football field, which is kind of mind-boggling to think about. But he, I thought that, yeah, like you said, the start was slow, and I thought that was because Atlanta they emphasized taking away the number one read, which I thought was primarily Diggs and Thielen. And so I thought Case Keenum was a little thrown off in that way, and it kind of took him a little bit to get comfortable going through the progressions. But, as the game went on, game plan, the flow of the game and the game plan kind of got clicking a little bit, and Case Keenum obviously connected. And clearly, I mean, 25 for 30 ain't bad. So, yeah, it was another great performance from Case Keenum. That's now 4 in a row against really good opponents, 3 of which are on the road.
Really good playoff-level opponents.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we should note the difference between pre-bye week Keenum and post-bye week Keenum. Because I think there's a pretty distinct difference here, and I think we're seeing, at least since the bye week now, we're seeing a Case Keenum that legitimately has a case to be the MVP of, or at least an MVP candidate.
He has a case?
Yeah, he has a case, and I see. We've had some complaints on the show about forcing the pun, so I didn't even want to mention it because it came naturally. I actually didn't try to. So, yeah.
Anyways, the next thing I was going to ask you about here is, so part of the reason why I believe that Case Keenum started off slow today, it seemed like his pocket awareness was a little off initially, right? I believe it was, it was one of the early sacks. Atlanta had 2 sacks in this game. It's one of the early sacks in the game, and it looked like, so when the pressure broke down, it's coming from his blind side. It looked like he tried to spin out of the play like a split second, I guess.
Oh, yeah. That was the one Riley Reef got beat, and he saw it just a little bit too late.
Like a fraction of the second too late. And maybe this is nitpicking. Honestly, it probably is. But that's, that wasn't very Case Keenum-esque, in my opinion. Generally speaking, throughout the year, particularly during these last 4 weeks, we've seen Keenum, basically have the best feel for the pocket that we've seen, for Vikings quarterbacks in a long time. Teddy Bridgewater, I can think of, obviously has great pocket presence, but even Favre in 2009, he'd roll over like a dead duck if there was a poor situation to throw the football. So Case Keenum's pocket presence was a big thing for me today. I think that as the game went on, this is definitely something that I'm going to be watching on my second viewing here, is that I think the pocket presence actually got better for him throughout the game. I feel like he kind of he was able to sort of have amnesia about the early sacks and forget about, that the pressure was breaking down in 2.5 seconds-ish, 3 seconds-ish, off his blind side, and trust his guy Riley Reif to do his job the rest of the game. And I think that his trust was to a degree rewarded.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what you have to have on an offense that flows, and especially an offense that's built on timing as well.
Right.
And I think the Vikings have that to some degree, and I think we should also give some credit to the running game once again, as we like to call him Eminem. I think our buddy Kyle Slaby, our new sports grunt, it's been a big help in kind of establishing that nickname for the Jerick McKinnon, Latavius Murray duo. But I thought what this running game has to do is be respectable and make the defense at least come up, and so that play action can work. And Latavius Murray did that today. Jerick McKinnon even did that today, even though the numbers don't necessarily suggest it. You have to. Yeah, I mean. That's true. He did have the touchdown out of the backfield.
The dirty bird
was phenomenal. The phenomenal touchdown dance. But the running game was established,
for sure.
And it was a threat, and that's what this offense has included. For really all season, and I think it's just as important as Case Keenum's play, because I think they kind of work it with each other in a relationship, and if one's not there, it's probably going to hurt the other one. So. Credit to the running game, credit to the offensive line for opening things up. I thought Nick Easton actually played pretty well today. And when I was, that's who I noticed in the offensive line. C.J. Ham made a couple nice plays as well. So I think the offense, there wasn't the production necessarily from the receivers that the Vikings were, we've been used to seeing. But we now know that they can win, and they can put together, 15-play, 89-yard drives that take up 9 minutes of game action. We know they can do that without the top production from those receivers, and I think that's very encouraging.
Absolutely. A couple of fine performances today from Murray and McKinnon. Whenever they got the hands on their ball, it seemed their hands on the ball. Phrasing. It seemed like whenever they got their hands on the ball that they were able to, have an efficient carry or an efficient touch, right? And what I mean by that is either 4 yards, a first down, or a touchdown. And basically that's what Murray and McKinnon were able to give the Vikings for the most part today. I thought they were very solid all the way around. And honestly, I think that's kind of what opened up Kyle Rudolph to a degree, because once the linebackers started coming in, generally speaking, you're going to see linebackers in coverage against the tight end. And once they were forced to stop the run, we saw Murray break off a couple of really big, nice carries where he was not only breaking tackles and making guys miss, but he was also reading the field very well. It forced Atlanta basically to attack the run game, because the Vikings were really, again, being very efficient on the ground for the vast majority of this game, or so it seemed, in my opinion. So I think that's kind of a product of what happened with Rudolph here and what made for him having a big day. So Rudolph, another guy, I've mentioned him just a couple times now. He's obviously had a very strong game, another touchdown. Seems like that play in the back of the end zone is there every single week. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah. I mean, not really. He's Kyle Rudolph, the red zone reindeer, for a reason. I'm stealing that from the Vikings Twitter account. I really don't feel like it's right if I take credit for that. But I will say the Vikings PR Twitter account tweeted out some stats, which I thought were actually, they reflect how efficient Kyle Rudolph is in the red zone. This season, 13 targets in the red zone, 12 catches, which is tied for the most in the NFL. 73 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns, which is 4th in the NFL. So he's most in the NFL for red zone receptions, and his 5 touchdowns are tied for 4th in the NFL. And I assume Jimmy Graham is leading that category because he scores every single week. But Kyle Rudolph, he's that big target. He's savvy in the red zone. He's not obviously we know he's not the fastest dude on the field, but he is pretty quick, deceivingly quick. And is he sneaky?
Is he sneaky fast?
I knew that was coming. As soon as I said that. But yeah, he is. He's sneaky quick out of his breaks. And I think we saw it today. He kind of had a little stick and nod route on that touchdown up the middle of the field, and Keenum found him. He's able to get open. So I think he's been a little bit underrated this year, and really how reliable he's been. And I think it's important that we give credit to what he's done as like kind of a third receiving weapon for this offense behind Thielen and Diggs.
Speaking of third receiving weapons, this was not originally on the docket for tonight, but how about Michael Floyd and Laquan Treadwell coming up with a couple big catches
and Jarius
today?
Wright.
And Jarius Wright as well.
They're all kind of sharing that like third wide receiver role.
And that's how it should be played. That we talked about it all summer, how the Vikings behind Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, right? Tons of versatility between those two players. Nobody's going to deny that. They can both, flip inside, they can run to the outside, they can break press, they can beat you on off coverage. Tons of versatility between those two guys. But then the next couple guys, I think Michael Floyd, you guys are going to probably say I'm biased, but whatever. I think Michael Floyd is a complete wide receiver as well. But then you look at a couple of these other guys, Treadwell so far hasn't shown complete wide receiver stature, I suppose. Or maybe he hasn't proven it, I should say. But, he's looking very good. His routes are much better this year. He gets open when they need him to. I think a big first down catch for like 8 yards or something like that moved the chains in the middle of the game to kind of give 4 more plays to the offense. So all these guys are doing their job, and basically that's what you want. You want flexibility between your two top guys, and you want situational role players that are going to come in. If I had to give Michael Floyd one specific trait that I think is kind of makes him ideal for role, it's that he's a possession receiver. He's not going to drop the football. Great catch radius, strong hands, gets all off the line, beats press coverage, no problem. That's the type of player he is. The Vikings have used him in key third down situations. Think about that big catch he had. What was it, 2 weeks ago? 20 yards down the side, the right sideline, where he's contorting his body in the air to catch the ball. Big first down catch on 3rd and long. That's the type of player Michael Floyd has been. So all of these guys are playing well. Now, well is a relative term for this receiving core now, because Adam Thielen, we probably all said that for this game, not a great game for Adam Thielen.
Right.
That's why it's relative, right? It was a strong performance nonetheless.
He came up big when the Vikings really needed it, though, at the end. That route, that slant, that get off from the line of scrimmage, unbelievable. Completely, made. Okay, so at the line of scrimmage, the cornerbacks are, the way the technique is to get that first punch at the line of scrimmage, kind of throw receivers off when you're in press coverage. Xavier Rhodes is so good at that, and actually that's that first play of the game for Julio Jones, on slant that was dropped. Xavier Rhodes missed on that punch. Adam Thielen, forced a miss. I believe was that Bryce Alford defending him on that play.
Robert Alford.
Excuse me, Robert Alford. And Alford completely missed because Adam Thielen juked his ankles in half, if that's even a phrase. I think I just made that up. But, it was unbelievable.
Professional there.
He literally created like 10 yards of separation on a slant route, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Adam Thielen and Diggs were they were schemed against very difficult. Atlanta really made sure they didn't have big days, and they tried to force the Vikings to win in other ways on offense. But when the opportunity was there, Keenum and Thielen hooked up to essentially ice the game. So, that's what's nice about, I think, about this team is that, Diggs, I think, had 1 or 2 catches today. Thielen had 4 catches today, and it's A, they still win, but B, to them, from what I understand, it seems like they don't really care. They don't really care if they're getting the ball. They're winning. There's 8 straight wins now, and it doesn't seem to matter for these guys as long as the scoreboard, shows the Vikings with more points than the opponent.
One of the beautiful things about having a couple of receivers that are undrafted, one from the 5th round, and then you got one in Michael Floyd, who's a former first-round pick. A lot of people counted him out after the DUI. You've got Treadwell, who, I'm still counting him out to a degree. Let's be real here. Jarius Wright, everyone was saying he should be cut. What's great about having receivers with the chip on their shoulder that basically a lot of us put there, they don't care. Yeah, they're not divas. They don't care about targets. They don't demand attention. They simply try to get the job done when the ball comes their way, and for the most part, they did that today. One note on Adam Thielen, as Drew said, only 4 receptions today, so that breaks up that streak for him. Again, doesn't matter at all. Just wanted to reference it as kind of a cool stat, simply for the fact that he went 11 games with 5 receptions or more, and he came up 1 short today. So consider that, when we're evaluating the performance of Adam Thielen later on this year, I guess after the season is finally over in February, right? Over to the defensive side of the football now. We got to talk about Xavier Rhodes versus Julio Jones. extremely impressive performance. Just to run down the numbers: 3 targets, 1 reception, 13 yards, 0 touchdowns allowed, 0 penalties, with Rhodes covering Julio Jones specifically. It is worth noting here that Rhodes did get beat by my guy Mohamed Sanu once, but for the most part, very strong day from Xavier Rhodes. We had a bit of a debate on this. What are your thoughts on Rhodes' performance today?
Well, yeah, but see, when I was watching the game, it seemed like there was space created by Atlanta receivers in general against Xavier Rhodes, and a lot of times either A, wasn't Ryan did not throw it that way, or B, the throw was there or it was off target, something like that. And but for the most part, it seemed like either Steve Sarkisian, Falcons offensive coordinator, did not schemed away from Xavier Rhodes, just kind of tried to avoid him, or Matt Ryan simply just didn't want to look that way. One or the other happened in this game, especially in the second half, because I don't recall a target towards Xavier Rhodes in the second half, and there was even that specific instance that Fox highlighted where Julio Jones came out of the huddle late. They kind of snuck him into the slot after Rhodes had already been lined up in that cover 3. So I think they were really trying to get creative and get Julio a better matchup than Xavier Rhodes, which leads me to my point here is that I don't think the numbers reflect Rhodes' on-field performance. I think it reflects the way Atlanta game planned for the Minnesota defense and trying to create matchups and trying to go attack Minnesota's defense away from Xavier Rhodes, if that makes sense.
No, that definitely makes sense. And I agree with you to a degree that reputation kind of precedes performance a lot of the time. I mean, what's the reason why we hyped this matchup so hard? Because of what Julio Jones did last week. 253 yards last week, 24 yards this week. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you not think there was a change in game plan somewhere along the line there? I absolutely agree with your take there. The only thing is my problem with that is that the way that phrasing comes off, the way that people are trying to kind of take away from Xavier Rhodes' performance and saying, I saw Sam Munson from PFF say this on Twitter today, and it's not the wrong point. It's just he pointed out that Rhodes was actually not in great coverage 100% of the time today, and again, he's right. He nailed his point. He made his point. I can't deny that the coverage was great on the the 3 or 4 plays that he giffed or whatever it was. But why? Why Matt Ryan didn't see Julio Jones in 3 seconds. So was he really open? I don't know. So, I mean, you can watch the film. We can play hindsight bias all day long. But Matt Ryan didn't see him. He's from Boston College. He's been playing quarterback at an extremely high level, at an MVP level for a very long time. So, you know what? I'm going to trust Matt Ryan here. I love the analytics. I love the statistics. But if Matt Ryan isn't targeting him, there's something wrong there beyond the stats. The stats are not showing the whole story here. So that's my problem with saying that Rhodes' coverage wasn't perfect the whole day, because in my opinion, it was perfect because it got the job done all day long against the league's premier receiver if it's not Antonio Brown.
Well, see, now the way I've been thinking about this is that I feel like the Ryan-Julio connection, it's one of the best in the NFL, if not the best, and I would assume Ryan has the trust in Julio to kind of give him a chance in these contested catch situations. Exactly. So I think, either he just didn't want to throw towards Xavier Rhodes, or he really thinks, Xavier Rhodes was doing that well. I didn't have the advantage of seeing every coverage snap down the field because I haven't seen the all 22 yet. And the Fox broadcast only shows a certain angle, but
right.
Something happened there. There was either the reputation of Xavier Rhodes, something Sarkisian scheming away from Rhodes. I think that
was the most blatant thing of all. And it was so obvious too. Yeah, every single person and their mothers could watch that game during the fourth quarter. In the closing moments of the damn game, by the way, Sarkisian was doing everything and anything, whether it was trickery, whether it was just kind of sport, kind of getting him out of the huddle late, as you said, or lighting him up across the field and audibling him just to see if Rhodes would follow. Mm-hmm. He did everything and anything to get his guy matched up on anyone else. And for what it's worth, Trey Waynes held his own. I think Mac Alexander held his own as well. My point being here is just overall, I get that the coverage wasn't perfect, but that at the cornerback position, when you're literally supposed to fail, Deion Sanders will tell you he failed a ton, because that's how the position works.
Right.
So I'm not going to look at a couple of coverage plays and see that he wasn't in perfect coverage when he wasn't even targeted and take away from the game that Rhodes was anything but exceptional today. If you want to give him a 97 out of 100, sure, do that. But you know what? A 97 out of 100 is still an A. So I'm going to take the A grade from Xavier Rhodes today.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of it's how you look at success at cornerback. If it's all about just the end results, the stats allowed, or the receptions allowed, etc. If that's what it's about, then Xavier Rhodes played exceptional today. If you look at the space created on these pass plays, and it doesn't really matter whether he was targeted on these plays or not, and you look specifically at that space created, how much, how often he was getting open and one-on-one, etc. I would say that it seemed to me, at least from what I saw, that Rhodes was giving up some space, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because Matt Ryan wasn't throwing it that way. The Falcons weren't even trying to attempt going near Xavier Rhodes. Those roads were apparently so closed. So,
hey, that's the thing about roads being closed. Like sometimes you get. This is going to be a great analogy. You're going to love this.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Sometimes when roads are closed, they're closed for such a long time that eventually you just stop going that route. Simple as that.
Wow, that's actually a really good analogy. Wow. That's actually really good because I've actually literally done that in my.
I am doing it in my current life right now. There's a road closed down the street that literally has a cone in the middle all the time, and I either work all the way around it in a legal fashion at like 4 in the morning, or I just take a different route completely. Because when roads are closed, they're damn closed. Period. That's just how it is. I love analyzing analytics. I love analyzing film, but what's too much? Honestly, because what's the bar? What's not is there a good enough? Because perfection isn't it's the goal. I understand that, but it's also not realistic. So if Xavier Rhodes is shooting for perfection, which is absolutely what he's doing right now, you saw him playing maximum effort all day long today. And if he I'm just going to use the quote. If you shoot for the moon and land in the stars, did you really fail? No, you didn't. You didn't. Sorry. So I love all the excessive information that comes on around the NFL. I mean, I was on Twitter all day today reading through everyone's stuff, because all of that stuff is extremely interesting to me. But when we're judging performance and we're evaluating the future, it's time for us to set, what's good enough for us, just as a whole. And what Xavier Rhodes did today is definitely good enough for me. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely good enough. I think my takeaway was that the either the scheme or Matt Ryan not throwing that way, whatever that was, that kind of it felt like there was a mental element to this of we're not going to throw the ball towards Xavier Rhodes going into the game.
Right.
And I feel like that had a bigger impact on the numbers of Julio Jones and I guess the perception of Rhodes' performance today than maybe what actually happened on the field in the secondary on these plays. But either way,
we saw this with Richard Sherman a couple of years ago, right?
Oh, this happened with Richard Sherman all the time.
You remember what was it? Was it 2012 when Sherman really broke out in a big way and he had something like 8 receptions or something interceptions or something ridiculous like that, and then the next year his targets just went way down and people started calling him a system cornerback and all that crap?
Yeah.
No.
Well, okay, so I mean I feel like receivers were getting open against Richard Sherman, and that was proven because do you remember when Jarius Wright just drilled him on that double move? The Vikings were dumb enough to throw at Richard Sherman in that game, and it worked. And to some degree, he was exploited because it's impossible to be perfect at the cornerback position.
Right.
It's just whether teams are able or willing.
It's a probability game.
Efficient enough to go at these elite cornerbacks. Then the Falcons just wanted to stay away from it as possible, as much as possible. So, I mean, yeah, I think the reputation going into the game and the game plan Atlanta put together had more to do with it than what Rhodes really showed on the field. But at the end of the day, again, it really doesn't matter. But it's just the point I thought was that's how I'm analyzing. And,
no, that's and you're again. I agree completely with your take. But here's the thing with reputation: is in order to earn a reputation, you need to be so damn good that people are just
right.
like,
well, yeah. But the reputation's built from past games.
So regardless, whether you want to say that he played well today or he played well 3 weeks ago, and that made today a better performance for him. Regardless, he comes out, he allows 13 yards to arguably the best receiver in the NFL. That's what Xavier Rhodes did for the Minnesota Vikings today. I don't care how you look at it. That's how I'm seeing it. So, I do want to mention this, too, because Waynes and Alexander also had a strong performance, in my opinion. Waynes got beat, I think, once or twice, and there was another time where I thought Taylor Gabriel definitely got the best of him downfield, and just the pressure, it got in Matt Ryan's face enough, and he was at a kind of a weird angle trying to throw off his back foot to, from as a right-handed quarterback trying to throw it on the left side of the field as you're getting bowled over, just sort of disrupted the play, in my opinion. So Waynes and Alexander definitely did their jobs today as well. Basically across the board, if you allow 173 passing yards alone to a vertical offense, a team that thrives on basically setting the tone with their running game and then attacking you deep, that's a hell of a performance across the board from the Vikings defensive backs. Andrew Sendejo had a fine game as well. Harrison Smith basically didn't even show up, so that means he was playing well. I just think that overall this was one of the most complete performances we've seen from a Vikings secondary in a very long time against, relative to a strong opponent. I mean, obviously they played very well against Chicago and Green Bay, but when you beat former MVP Matt Ryan and, former All-Pro Julio Jones at their own game, I mean, what more do you need to do to prove yourself as an elite defense in this league, especially with, guys like Waynes and Alexander progressively getting better this season?
Right, and I mean, this reminded me a lot of the performance against the Rams. I mean, you get a scorching hot offense that comes in putting up something like 34 points a game coming in. I'll have to go back and look at the specific numbers on that. But I mean, this offense was humming coming into this game. They're at home, and the Vikings just stonewalled them completely, and they actually only ran one play inside the red zone all game, and it was a field goal attempt. So, I mean, the Vikings it was either A, shut down a drive completely. I mean, from the get-go, 3 and out, you punt the ball, or it was bend but don't break, and they allowed a field goal. And I mean, the turnover numbers aren't there as they have been in the to compare to last year. I mean, the hot start last year was due to all these crazy turnovers, but this year you're seeing the Vikings win by simply not letting the opposing team get first downs. That's really what it comes down to. They're the number one third down defense in the NFL, and today they went up against the top third down offense, and they held them to 1 for 10 on third down. And I mean, right there, it's
situational football.
Mike Zimmer needs to be the coach of the year favorite at this point because of what he's doing against teams that are perceived to be the top offense in the NFL, Rams and Falcons, and he's shutting them down thoroughly.
Those are definitely, by the way, just from a definite, that's a definitive fact. From a statistical standpoint, that the Rams this year are the best offense, and last year the Falcons were the best offense. Yes, I know they switched offensive coordinators, but they're still running a West Coast system. I don't give Sarkisian that much of a, you know what I'm saying. I don't no mercy.
I got the numbers here. Falcons previous 3 games before today, 34 points, 27 points. Today against the Vikings, 9. And then back at the Rams game, so the Rams since week 6, these are their point totals: 27, 33, 51, 7, 26, 32.
Mm-hmm. I saw. I don't know what the guy's actual name is, but Krauserific on Twitter.
That's exactly what I was looking at. I should probably reference that. Yeah. At Krauserific. By the way, he's a really good follow on here. I would recommend that because he's got all kinds of nuggets on his timeline here. So.
Absolutely, he does a hell of a job. So, let's talk a little bit about the defensive line and the linebackers, and then we'll get into the NFC playoff picture here. Defensive line overall today, I thought they were okay. They got the job done. Obviously, they did a good job setting the edge. No sacks in this game. Consistent pressure. What makes this, better than an okay performance is, first of all, they didn't allow a touchdown, so they were clearly doing something right. And second of all, I thought that they just were very consistent when it mattered. They got pressure and third and long situational football, right? Again, this goes back to the whole thing, like what's good enough for you. If the Vikings don't get any sacks and they don't get any turnovers, but they still allow 9 points, does it really matter that they didn't have any turnovers or any sacks? Like, do those stats are those even relevant stats to reference, or are they just cool facts for fans to enjoy? Yeah. Because I honestly I don't think that projecting off of stats and turnovers, which are largely going to be a product of failure from the offense, are actually a reflection of how that team played defensively. So, it would have been nice to get an interception today. I think there was probably one or two opportunities where the Vikings could have maybe made something happen. It definitely would have been nice to see, Matt Ryan on his butt a couple times for a sack. But at the same time, the pressure was in his face enough where he was errant, he was inconsistent, he was basically trying to get the ball out of his hands too quickly, and he had happy feet to a degree, which is something we don't normally see from Matt Ryan. Again, an extremely cerebral quarterback, a guy that reads the field extremely well. You could take a lot of things away from Matt Ryan throughout his career. You can't take away his mind, and his mind told him that, one, Xavier Rhodes was not to be messed with today, and two, that the pressure was coming in hot and he better get the ball out to Sanu, who, by the way, after I said he sucked, led the team for Atlanta in receiving yards today with, I believe, 47 of them. So,
which that doesn't exactly prove anything one way or the other.
It doesn't.
I mean, you said he was bad. Having 47 yards, or 43 actually is what it is, but 43 yards, that doesn't really prove anything, against what you've said, but.
He has 47 yards.
It's not a Marvin Jones thing from last week.
I do want to say this. The reason why I think that, honestly, this game reinforces my theory on Sanu is that, I think it's fairly evident that they were trying to get away from Xavier Rhodes. So clearly, if the number 2 receiver is Mohamed Sanu, he was getting the first read quite a bit of the time, and yet he only came up with 43 yards. So is he good? No, probably not. But you take it for what it is. It's your guys' opinion, too. This is just a discussion that we're leading. So on to the NFC Playoff Picture now after another strong performance from the Vikings defense. Philadelphia lost tonight. There's a reason why that's why we record our shows at 11:30 at night, so that we can figure out, what's going to actually happen. Drew had that correct. I actually thought Philadelphia was going to go in there and walk all over Seattle. Just, for what it's worth.
You did get that correct.
You did. I think it's worth it's worth reinforcing the fact now that Seattle's not dead until they're officially dead. Just to point that out real quick. I know that's not relevant to what the actual discussion is here right now. But as it stands today, your Minnesota Vikings are the number 1 seed in the NFC playoffs. By tiebreaker, they own, I believe it's head-to-head record against common opponents. That's going to be the tiebreaker.
It's the strength of victory. So
strength of victory, okay.
The win percentage of the teams you've beaten. Yep. And I think the Vikings actually throttle the Eagles.
Yeah.
It's like a good 10% or 10 percentage points difference, something like that. It's pretty, or like, I guess what would that be? Because I think Vikings is like 47% for winning percentage against, and then I think the Eagles is like 37% or something like that. So it's pretty remarkable, the difference. So the Eagles have some catching up to do in that department. And looking at their schedule after the Rams this week, I don't think they have really much of a chance to do that. So if the Vikings, they control their own destiny, but I think they have to some degree some leeway, even if they do lose a game, because I think the Eagles, looking the way they played against the Seahawks, not a given that they can go and beat the Rams this next week either. So
absolutely, I got a comment today. This is, for what it's worth, this was before the Philadelphia game, when I think a lot of people still believe that the Eagles. I'm trying to find the guy's name. I was on Twitter all day today, so I'm having a difficult time finding my timeline here. But someone pointed out to me, I think it was Pete Blake or something like that. I apologize if I just butchered your name. But he basically said that if all 3 teams, the Saints, the Eagles, and the Vikings, all end up with the same record, the record he used as a reference was 13-3, then actually the Vikings would not be the number 1 seed there. That would go to the Saints by some weird-ass tiebreaker rule. So that's worth keeping an eye on, I suppose, if all 3 of those teams are forced to break the tie in that way. But it certainly looks like with the Vikings' remaining schedule now, get Carolina on tap up next week. They looked, in my opinion, vulnerable at times, but they definitely work like Ron Rivera coaches them to. Those guys did not give up for 60 minutes. That was my number one takeaway from Carolina. So definitely still a beatable team. I think New Orleans proved that. They gave us a blueprint to a degree. I'm sure that Mike Zimmer will be watching that film all week long. But they also showed, that they're not going to be a cakewalk this weekend, or next weekend, I should say, and that's not a game that we can roll over on. But other than that, Cincinnati, pretty garbage team at this point. I think that's, a little bit rude, but probably fair to say. Green Bay, if they don't have Aaron Rodgers, I feel pretty confident, even despite the fact that they're going into Lambeau. And then Chicago, who is basically in shambles. They just lost to the Baltimore Ravens by a lot of points. So you have to like the Vikings' chances here of finishing the season at 14-2 at this point, honestly. I think that 12-4 or 13-3 are a little bit more realistic. But you have to like where the Vikings stand in the NFC playoff.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, if with this remaining schedule, if you look at the last 4 games that they've all won after the bye, you got 3 really tough road games at Washington, a team that's better than their record.
Yep.
And then at Detroit in a tough divisional matchup on Thanksgiving, and then at Atlanta today, really tough place to play in their new stadium, defending NFC champions, and they get the home win against the current number 3 seed Rams. I mean, right there, that's the toughest 4-game gauntlet really on their schedule, and that's going to be way tougher anyway than they're going to get their remaining 4 games of the season. So, if judging by the last 4 games, I don't think there's any reason to believe the Vikings can't go, and win the rest of their games on this schedule here and get to 14-2 and then take home that number 1 seed. So, I really like what the Vikings are doing right now, and it's the balance in this roster, the fact that they really don't have a weakness anywhere.
Right.
When I actually think one of the questions that we're going to get to, I think we were asked was, what do you want the Vikings to improve on the most moving forward here? And I seriously am struggling to think of something, because you know what, the Vikings made both their extra points in this game, which against the Falcons. So
and Ryan Quigley down the ball at the 2-yard line.
Yes,
made
Pat McAfee
for the brand made a for the brand video on that. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So basically a strong performance, across the board here. I do want to reference, while we're still talking about the NFC playoff picture, I do think it's probably more important than at least I initially perceived for this team to win a lot more football games. First and foremost, because of the stat that I just gave you guys about how if all 3 of these top NFC teams finish with the same record, we don't want to be in that situation. And I also want to quick pat myself on the back for saying that the Saints are probably the hardest team to go on the road against. I think you guys saw that this week against Carolina, the way they were able to run the football and how dynamic of an athlete Alvin Kamara is. This is a dangerous NFC right now. I think that it does hurt the Vikings' chances of, I don't want to mention it, but you know what I'm saying, what I'm alluding to right now, that this NFC is so there's so much parity, a theme we talked about earlier in the season, and the fact that there are 6 or 7, maybe even 8 very solid, if not great teams in this NFC right now, that hurts their chance of, first of all, having home field throughout, and second of all, doing some real damage in the postseason. But at the same time, if you're playing at home, I mean, there are no teams right now where I'm looking at and saying the Vikings can't beat them. I think the Vikings can contend with anyone at home right now. So if you go ahead and get that 14-2 mark and you get home field literally all the way throughout, because, I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard this, but the Super Bowl is in Minnesota this year. It's a situation where the Vikings could I don't want to say easily, but very realistically run the table if things continue to click as well as they have.
I mean, if the Vikings are hosting all of their playoff games, I feel really good about their chances. I mean, this team at this point, they look invincible on the road.
Yeah.
And then at home, they're only that much better. We know how crazy that crowd is. By the way, the crowd today, from what I understand, what it looks like on TV and post game social media, posts from the Vikings social media accounts, there was a lot of purple and gold in Atlanta in this game, which is
on top of that
was pretty cool to see.
On top of that, those purple and gold people are out there sporting Team Shut Everybody Up. Because as soon as the Vikings got on the board, I mean, crowd noise was not a fact. Not a fact.
Oh, no, not at all.
I mean, the fact that the offense couldn't get a touchdown at home, generally speaking, that's going to be considered an embarrassing performance.
Yeah.
You at least expect to find a way to drive down and score at least one time. And as Drew referenced earlier in the show, the 20-yard, they only played one play inside the 20, and it was a field goal attempt. So overall, a fairly embarrassing performance for Steve Sarkisian. And honestly, if he's really built his case for a reason why making a switch to someone else at the end of this season, despite having a fairly
but is it like
okay
it's almost
year.
like it's not that embarrassing though because of who it happened against? Like I mean, I understand like at home you got to score and you can't put up just 9 points at home, but like I mean, Mike Zimmer, man, this Vikings defense and the talent that's there, the scheme that's in place, it's the real deal. And I think any team at this point, I mean, if I don't care about what the national media thinks right now because I mean, nobody even they're trying so hard to ignore the Vikings.
So hard.
So hard. I mean, this week, the Saints got to win, right? And who was it that said that the Saints are the hottest team in the NFL right now? Was on OT today?
It was on the OT. It was TJ. Whatever TJ, I can't remember TJ's last name right now, but it was him that said it. He was breaking into an interview with Aaron Andrews on the field with Alvin Kamara, and his exact sentence was something. I'm trying to remember the exact sentence. He said, "The New Orleans Saints are the hottest team in the NFL, and
they
Alvin
lost
Kamara
7 days ago."
Yeah, and they lost 7 days ago. But basically, the point he was making is that the Saints and Alvin Kamara are the hottest team in the NFL, and that. Obviously, Alvin Kamara is one of the hottest running backs in the NFL, which that's a point I absolutely cannot deny. He is lights out right now for sure. But I understand that to a degree he was just taking his audience into a new segment, and especially if it's a Saints audience, you want to obviously it's going to up your views to you know what I'm saying. Yeah. But if we're being
point is though, like the Vikings are being overlooked, and they will probably continue to be overlooked because they don't have the flashy quarterback. Case Keenum's not flashy by any means. He's no Tom Brady. He's no Ben Roethlisberger. He's no Carson Wentz. He's no Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, Drew Brees. I mean, all of these teams have these quarterbacks that are either the first round pick, first overall pick, whatever, or B, they're flashy. They have
swagger.
Sustainable. Yeah, they've established success in the NFL. Case Keenum is definitely not that. The undrafted guy who I feel like most people are just kind of seeing this honeymoon taking place, and they really are expecting it to kind of fall apart.
People are still waiting on Case Keenum to fall apart. And again, I just want to say this: I don't blame you guys for thinking that. I was thinking all week that I wrote that article about how I believe in Case Keenum. I was totally. I mean, how BJ Reidell would it have been for me to basically pour words onto a page, 2,600 words about how Case Keenum's the guy, only for him to come out and get absolutely blown up by Atlanta today. That would have been perfect Vikings, right? It didn't happen, and that's just another reason why maybe, just maybe, this might be the year for the Minnesota Vikings. So,
that's a scary thought.
I'm speaking in hypotheticals right now.
Okay, hypotheticals.
Hypothetically speaking. So, on to the Twitter questions today. Here's our plan for Twitter moving forward. Thanks to you guys, we are doing a little bit better on Twitter now. We're getting more questions. So we're going to pick 3 questions every week because I know there are some people that are, in our listening audience that don't want to listen to us talk for 90 minutes. So we're going to try to keep these shows under 60 moving forward here. And part of how we're going to do that is by kind of picking 3 of, quote, the best Twitter questions. Obviously, all of the questions that you guys asked are going to be the best questions ever because you're asking us, but we only get to pick 3 just from a time shortage perspective. So why don't you give me the first one for the week?
Yeah, we'll take this one from Tommy Gunn at Tommy the Gun 13. He's asking about the Vikings closing out games prior to the final few minutes of the fourth quarter. He says, do you think there's any possible way the Vikings could close out a game prior to the final 3 minutes of the fourth quarter? I'm asking for a friend whose heart can't take it much more. It's me. I'm the friend.
This guy clearly knows who he's dealing with here. No, that's great. Yeah, I don't. I started smiling like halfway through that question and sort of lost it. But I think that I think that I'm with you. I don't have an answer to this question. I don't think Drew does either, to be honest. But I think they do. I think they do have the ability to do it right now.
Yeah.
Like Drew just said, they kicked both extra points successfully today. Big steps.
Actually, though.
Baby steps, I should say. So am I confident? Yes, absolutely, especially coming off of such an impressive victory. Am I not going to count the Vikings out to break our hearts in just a miraculous way once again? Never. Not until the ring is on my finger. And by that, I mean I play for the team and I should get a ring. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yes. The one thing I wanted to add was that I think this concern is somewhat valid because you look at the Redskins game, they kind to a degree let the Redskins back in that one, and then the Detroit game as well. So it's somewhat of concern, but I think today the Vikings, when they got the ball back after that, I think it was a failed fourth down play for Atlanta. And the Vikings had a chance, they were up 5 and, they kind of needed a decent drive to ice the game. And you saw the Vikings, you could have either been super conservative and kind of just try to take as much time off the clock as you can. And if you have to punt, you have to punt, or you can be aggressive trying to win the game. And I think Pat Shurmur found a very good happy medium there when he had, I think, he used Murray on the ground, but then he had 2 pass plays that were easy, high percentage throws that would also allow, the completion to be made and the clock to keep running. The Kyle Rudolph play action rollout on I believe, one of the first couple plays of the drive. It gained 15-something yards, and Rudolph stayed in bounds for a first down. And then obviously the Thielen slant off the line of scrimmage.
Yes.
It's a high percentage. I could have made that throw. I don't mean to insult Case Keenum, but
Yes, you do. Just be honest. You mean to insult Case Keenum.
Yes. Well, when Thielen has that good of a break off of his slant, it's very hard to miss that throw. So
there's a dude in our comments section that literally on every single time he just says that we're making fun of Case Keenum, and so that was clearly the point. Yeah. That was clearly the point in time where we were making fun of Case Keenum on this show, in particular. So, sorry, Case. We're just haters, I guess.
Yep.
On to the next one.
Next question here. We're going to make a bold prediction here. Or maybe it's a bold prediction, but it's from Carson Schubert at Carson Shuby. Straight up right now, do you think the NFC will go through U.S. Bank Stadium?
Okay, so I saw this one ahead of time. Like I said, I was on Twitter literally all day today. And I've been thinking about this one, and I don't see a reason right now why not. Again, we just talked about the schedule before. If they beat Carolina next week, that's kind of the last significant challenge on the year. Obviously, I feel like I always need to give a disclaimer just to shut down the comments section. Obviously, every game is important. Every game is going to be a challenge, but next week is probably the only game remaining where the Vikings won't be favored by Vegas. Let's put it that way. And honestly, they might be favored by Vegas.
Might be. They weren't favored today, for what it's worth.
Right. That was where I was going with that statement. The west of the way out with Cincinnati, Green Bay, and Chicago. I think those are all games the Vikings should be expected to win. I think they will. The Las Vegas odds will reflect that. The reason why I'm using Las Vegas odds right now is because you can't deny their consistency. You can deny mine, but you can't deny Las Vegas's. So I think the Vikings definitely have an opportunity to really, first of all, establish themselves as the first, the number 1 seed next week. It's a very big game against Carolina, and if they do that, they control their own destiny, and I have no reason to doubt them as a team that very realistically could have home field throughout.
Yeah, I think today was kind of the more important game for me in deciding, the whole first round bye kind of argument for me was, I thought Atlanta was much more dangerous than Carolina, just because, that I think they're much stronger on both sides of the ball. Like there's more balance there, and I think they're more consistent as well. And I think Carolina can have kind of some off games, get out of rhythm easily, which I think, by the way, the Vikings will do next week. And they showed it week 3 last year as well that, they can, the Vikings defense especially can knock Carolina out of its rhythm. So I think the Vikings will win next week. And from there, you have Cincinnati, you have Green Bay, you have Chicago. The one thing that could get in the way is the Aaron Rodgers returning on.
Of course, you're going to bring that up.
This is relevant. Okay, it's very relevant.
It is.
I would never bring up.
I was just answering in a way that I know that Twitter and our comment section will answer because they love when you talk about Aaron Rodgers.
I would never bring up Aaron Rodgers in a conversation that's irrelevant.
Correct. Of course.
But I would do that for Andrew Luck though, for what it's worth. But I do think at this point, I think Minnesota's the choice. Like if you're picking a team right now to say that would be the 1 seed, looking at the way the remaining schedules look, looking at the way each team stacks up right now, I think Minnesota is the pick out of any of the other choices that you have. So that's, I guess, my answer to that question. I mean, I'm going to keep talking because it looks like you're busy writing something down.
No, I'm actually drawing a picture of you so I can put it on Twitter later and get some advertising for us. It's pretty fun. Actually? Yeah, I'm a very poor drawer, so I think
you're not actually drawing a picture of me right now.
Yeah, check it out.
Wow. All right.
Keep going.
Okay. Well, I'll go to our next question here. I think our last question here is going to be from @Bubka2K5. So our question from I keep it so real.
So real.
We answered that one kind of earlier when I alluded. This is when I alluded to when he talked about in what area would you like to see the Vikings improve or work on the most, and we kind of said, well, we don't really have an answer for that at this point. So from Bubka at Bubka2K5, it seems like the play calling was very different for this game. Am I wrong in believing that the Vikings' ability to play different offensive styles is a significant advantage over most teams? The offense can look so different from week to week, and it's got to be hard to game plan against. So did you see anything different from Pat Shurmur that kind of, maybe threw off the Atlanta defense to some degree? Because, I mean, is that what you saw? Because I kind of see it a little bit differently, but what did you see?
Not really, to be honest. I think that Pat Shurmur had a solid game today. I don't think he was perfect by any means. I kind of used Twitter as a notes section, to be honest with you. There was one play in particular that it was a 1st and 20 situation.
Yeah, and
he ran the football, and I don't blame him because again, this is a West Coast offense. They're trying to set up play action in any way possible, and generally, 1st and 20 situation, you're just trying to get yards back, and if you break one longer, then maybe you start trying to go vertical once again. So I get it. But I don't think that he was doing anything, that he hasn't done this year. The goal line play designs were phenomenal once again. Like I said, I swear to God that Kyle Rudolph play in the back of the end zone is always there. Whether they're running it out of the shotgun or running it with play action, it's seemingly always there. That flat route to Jerick McKinnon, I didn't think it was going to McKinnon, but I saw the flat route coming all the way on that play. I think he's been doing a phenomenal job. And I guess what did he do differently? Every week in the NFL is a challenge for an offensive coordinator. So what he did differently this week was prepare a new game plan for a completely different offense. And basically he went toe-to-toe with another guy that uses a ton of West Coast customs and Steve Sarkisian. So there's a lot of play action in this game just all together. And basically what he did, in my opinion, was just kind of go shot for shot with Sarkisian and did a hell of a job against Dan Quinn's defense, basically manipulating them, keeping Vic Beasley away. I mean, did we hear Grady Jarrett's name at all today? I bet you'll hear both those guys' name next week quite a few times because they're great players. They just didn't play well today. So as a whole, Pat Shurmur just continues to do his thing. He's just not really doing anything, I guess, notable anymore because we're used to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think his game plan was, it didn't really change from last week. But I think what happened was Atlanta took away Diggs and Thielen for the most part early on. And that kind of forced Shurmur to make some adjustments. And that's why I think you saw, Laquan Treadwell, Jarius Wright, and Michael Floyd combined for what I believe was 6 catches in this game. So you got 6 catches out of the third wide receiver role, I guess. And I think it's got to be a season high for those 3 players combined. So I think part of it was Case Keenum figuring out going through progressions and kind of doing so quicker, kind of knowing what Atlanta was trying to do defensively. But I think part of it too is Pat Shurmur making adjustments early on, getting Rudolph more involved, and also going to your Floyd, your Treadwells, your Jarius Wrights on some third downs, and kind of acknowledging that you can take away, you can put either bracketed coverage on Diggs and Thielen or even straight up double team them. We will go to other guys because we have the weapons to beat you. So I think that's more of what it was, and that's kind of why it looked a little bit different for this Vikings offense. But, they did put together 2 touchdown drives that were essentially, they were the difference. And I think we have to give some credit to Shurmur for making those adjustments.
Absolutely. We got anything left here today, or is that
that was our third and final one here. So
excellent. All right. Well, we once again, folks, if we didn't read off your Twitter question, keep trying. Apparently, because we're starting to get a nice amount of Twitter questions. That's awesome. We really appreciate that.
I will add one more thing. We did get one from Vincent Levine at Vincent Levine 9, but he asked the same kind of thing about who the number one team in the NFC.
Right.
And we kind of said well. I think the Vikings are the best team in the NFC right now. So.
It certainly looks that way, and honestly, that's a perfect way to close out the show with your Minnesota Vikings sitting at a 10-2 mark atop the NFC, atop
10-0 when scoring 10 points this year.
29-3. They didn't get to the 21-point plateau, so I didn't get to do my weekly tweet today. But they're still 29-3 when scoring at least 21 points. So, hell of a football team right now, folks. I mean, I'm sure that the Vikings could potentially find a way to blow this up. I just don't know how they're going to do it yet because I'm seeing so many good things all around from this team. So, overall, fantastic performance. Highlights for me, Xavier Rhodes, Case Keenum's grit, just the overall, the well-roundedness of this team across the board. I guess if you had to give a game ball, who's your game ball going to?
Game ball. I'm gonna go with Case Keenum because I think the slow start, at least for me, I was personally rattled by it. I thought Atlanta did a really good job of kind of stonewalling what the Vikings like to do, and I think a lot of credit here again goes to Shermer, but Case Keenum put together a really, really good second half and kept the Vikings under control, and he led that beautiful 15 play drive of 89 yards that kind of really put a statement in this game and statement on kind of how this game would end and set the tone. So I really liked that from Case Keenum, and I thought this is just another it's another step in him kind of proving doubters wrong as to this is going to fall apart eventually. I'm really have a tough time seeing that happening. I think this is just Case Keenum, who he is when he has the right system and the right weapons around him.
I am for my game ball, I'll go on the opposite side of the ball. Guess who I'm going to pick?
Wow, this is a tough one.
Yeah, Xavier Rhodes is my game ball. Fantastic performance. I personally was talking all week about this matchup, thrilled about this matchup, and honestly, to a degree, it kind of sucked that Sarkisian started scheming away from him because we didn't get to see what it would be like if Rhodes literally covered him 100% of the time. I mean, I believe during the broadcast, I believe it was Burkhardt that said that he talked to Rhodes ahead of the game and he asked him basically, how are you going to be covering Xavier Rhodes, or excuse me, are you going to be covering Julio Jones the entire time? And Rhodes said something. He had a hilarious analogy, but basically saying that he was planning on being on him the entire time, like white on rice. So, fantastic performance all around from Xavier Rhodes. I mean, some people are going to try and take away from it. I'm not going to. I loved the performance today. Gritty performance. He's doing something special in Minnesota this year. Very, very happy that I've been following him so hard this season. So, strong performances all around for the Minnesota Vikings. That wraps up the show for today. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Get your shirts, your About the Labor T-shirts on Amazon.com. And where else can you find us? VikingsTerritory.com, as always. Myself on Twitter, Robert Reidell, Reidell. Drew Mahowald on Twitter, Mahowald. Make sure to do that and send us more questions, more thoughts, all kinds of stuff onto the Vikings ATL Pod Twitter account. Kyle Slaby's doing a phenomenal job adding some extra content for your Twitter timelines via that Twitter account right now. So make sure you're following that. And keep track of the show. We hope that we're continuing to get better here, just like the Vikings are. And we'll probably catch you guys sooner rather than later. As you know, we'll be back here on Wednesday. Don't know what we're going to be doing just yet, but I have a general theory that it's probably going to be another positive show following yet another great Vikings performance. Probably. That seems like a fair take. So once again, VikingsTerritory.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Amazon for the T-shirts. You know where we'll be at on Twitter. We'll be there to answer your questions, talk to you guys about anything and everything Minnesota Vikings at all times. Thanks for joining us on the show. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Give us an upvote if you haven't already. I think apparently that matters, so do that for us if you're not used to doing that. And we will catch you guys on Wednesday for another great About the Labor show.